Hi, where do you think the mind is located? Is it in the heart? Is it in the brain? Or the whole body? Or is it outside the body? Welcome to Mindscape Matters, a channel to discuss mental health and more. I am Dr. Mohan Raj. I'm a consultant psychiatrist based in Chennai, and I'll be your guide as we explore this wonderful landscape together. Before we discuss the location of the mind, many of you might ask me, what is mind? Now, there are lots of philosophical explanations, answers to this question, but for today's purpose, let us consider mind as something which is responsible for the following faculties: consciousness, attention concentration, learning and memory, emotions, perception, and judgment. In prehistoric times, humans were curious about what is inside the human body. So whenever there were dead bodies, they opened them up and made assumptions about the functions of various organs. So the earliest text talks about brain, and they saw this brain which was jelly-like, and there were a lot of tubes going away from the brain which we now know as nerves, and they thought the brain was some kind of a cooling system for the body. Subsequently, Hippocrates around 400 BC said that the brain was the seat of intelligence. This was followed by Plato, who said the brain is the seat of all mental functions. Now, we will think two great people have spoken, so the matter is settled. But today, we use heart emojis to say I love it, and we attribute a lot of emotions to the heart. If you look at common language, you have something like heartbroken, you broke my heart, you stole my heart, you are heartless, brave heart. There are a whole lot of emotions attributed to the heart. Why is it so? The person responsible for connecting the heart to emotion is Aristotle. Now, Aristotle has said a lot of wise things, and he was well respected, had a lot of influence around the world, and they accepted what he said about heart and emotions. Subsequently, there were many debates about the location of the brain, and the decisive turn came in 1848 when a railroad worker called Phineas Gage had an accident near Vermont. Phineas Gage was part of a group which was laying a railroad near Vermont, and he was personally in charge of blasting the rocks. He had placed gunpowder and fuse inside a rock and was plugging the hole with mud using a long iron rod. He got briefly distracted when the bomb blew, and the iron rod went through his jaw, the left eye, left frontal lobe, and came out through the skull. Now, he had seizures immediately, lost consciousness for a brief while, and he was taken to a doctor when he was actually conscious, and they took some time to surgically remove the rod. Subsequently, his friends were telling over a period that his behavior has completely changed. His personality has changed. This is not Phineas Gage anymore. Now, this change in personality following a head injury, following an injury to the left frontal lobe, brought in tremendous interest among neurologists, psychiatrists, psychologists, and the general public that a brain injury can make behavioral changes. And this led to a lot of study of people who had various head injuries, either in the war or in other accidents. And people started documenting, doctors started documenting the effects of various head injuries. Paul Broca was a pioneer who showed that the brain doesn't work as a whole, but specific parts of the brain have specific functions. The next major leap came when Penfield, a neurosurgeon, was waiting for surgery to start. And neurosurgery is usually done without general anesthesia, and patients are usually conscious during the procedure. Now the patient said something like, "Don't tickle my leg." And Penfield was surprised because nobody was near his leg. He noticed that the other end of the scalpel had inadvertently touched the patient's brain. And out of curiosity, he touched the area again and said, "What do you feel?" And the patient said, "Now again somebody is scratching my leg." So Penfield started touching more places in the brain, and the patient started telling different parts of his body and said, "Somebody is touching here, somebody is scratching here." So from that day, every time Penfield had a surgery, the surgery could be anything else, but before he starts surgery, he made it a routine to touch various parts of the brain with a blunt object, and he will record the response that the patient gives. And out of this came the map for both sensory cortex and the motor cortex. To study any area, the tools become very important. To study a complex organ like brain, the tools those days were very, very limited. All they had was the clinical examination of the patient. Subsequently, EEG was discovered by Hans Berger, which was used to measure the electrical activity of the brain and is predominantly used in the study of epilepsy and some related disorders. X-ray by Röntgen could help us to visualize fracture of the skull, but did not help in visualizing the brain. For that, we had to wait until the arrival of CT scans, and CT scans for the first time could help us to visualize a living brain. And CT scans became better and better in the 80s and led to the next stage called MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, which was an entire paradigm shift in imaging and helped in resolutions being better. Now, MRI was followed by a concept called functional MRI, which helps us to visualize parts of the brain. That is, which part of the brain are involved when somebody is doing a particular mental task, like say a math problem or an emotional state. And you can actually visualize which part of the brain is involved during this. With the available tools, we still feel it's inadequate to study an organ like brain. But are the tools sufficient to answer our original question about the location of the mind? Yes, they are sufficient. All the evidence point to one organ, the brain. The brain is the seat of all mental functions which we have discussed in the beginning of the video. Now we look at a couple of more scenarios. A person is on a heart-lung mission. That is, the person is alive, his heart and lung are not functioning, and during a surgery he is connected to a heart-lung mission. And if he is conscious, he will be able to talk, he will be able to remember, he will be able to do every mental function possible. That is without a heart and the lung being there. Now the second scenario. Somebody receives a transplant heart from a donor, but his mental functions are same as before. His identity is the same, his memories are the same. The heart transplant does not affect his mental functions. Now, when do we transplant a heart? After the donor is brain dead. Now, you will never hear about brain transplant because one reason is organ harvest is done only after the donor is brain dead. So after brain dead, how are you going to transplant the brain? That's number one. Second is, even in the unlikely experiment of somebody's brain being transplanted, the recipient's personality is going to completely disappear because he's going to get a new brain. Now, theoretically and practically, a brain transplant is not possible. We have come to the conclusion that the location of the mind is the brain, no doubt about it. But we continue to place heart emojis in our messages and on social media. Why do we do that? This is because of the tremendous influence that Aristotle had then and is having now. Thank you for watching this video, and if you like this video, share it with 4 of your friends. And if one of them would love to watch it in Tamil, tell them that this content is available in Tamil. Stay tuned because Mindscape matters. Bye.